Oh, hello. My name is Marlene Alleman, and I'm very happy to welcome you all here at EUROSTUDENT Talks. Either it's your first time when you're here, or even if you are our frequent listener already. Like last time, we today continue introducing results of EUROSTUDENT 8 topical modules. At last webinar, we talked about the topics of digitalization and the impact of COVID-19. But today our focus will be on discrimination. And we will start with an international comparative perspective. And after that, we will turn our eyes to a country example. And we are going to talk about Sweden, both about the discrimination experiences of students and national minorities, but there will be some additional topics as well. Before we start, let me very briefly introduce our speakers. International comparative perspective will be presented by Cordelia Menz. Cordelia joined the higher education research group at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Vienna in July 2023, and currently she primarily works for the EUROSTUDENT project. Her interest in higher education research evolved during her studies in psychology, which is why she then decided to do a PhD on evidence-based teacher education. And besides Cordelia, we have here three wonderful researchers from Sweden. Erika Finnerman is an analyst at the Department for Policy Analysis at the Swedish Council for Higher Education. She has been working with admission to higher education in Sweden for more than 30 years, mainly concerning regulations and how these regulations can be applied. Erika has been involved in EUROSTUDENT since 2012. It means that starting already with EUROSTUDENT 5. Also, we have here Jari Rusanen today. Jari also works as an analyst at Swedish Council for Higher Education within the Department for Policy Analysis. He has worked with EUROSTUDENT since EUROSTUDENT 6, and his experience within the field of higher education dates back to 1996. And surprise, surprise, like her colleagues Erika and Jari, Sofia Scholler is analyst at the Swedish Council for Higher Education as well. She works with analysis and coordination within the field of widening participation in higher education, equal treatment, and discrimination. Sofia has been working within public administration at different authorities most of her professional life with issues within the sustainability and participation fields. I think that it's, speakers-wise, one of the most crowded EUROSTUDENT talks I have had, besides the classical December talks where we usually have different student representatives here, but it's an absolutely nice experience to have 4 speakers here today. So hello to all of you, and I think that we can start. So Cordelia, please feel free to begin with your presentation.
Yes, thank you very much, Marlene. I hope you can hear me and see the slides.
Yes.
And thank you for the nice introduction. And I'm looking forward to present you our topical module report on discrimination in the context of higher education that I wrote together with my colleague Sylvia Mandl. Within the next 15 minutes, I'll present some cross-national comparison data regarding discrimination experiences and safety feeling within the context of higher education. And we were especially interested in how prevalent various discrimination experiences are in higher education, whether students feel safe, both on the premises of the higher education institutions and in their neighborhoods, and also whether specific groups report more discrimination experiences than others. And because I don't know how familiar you are with the EuroStudent questionnaire, I'll shortly present the questions we used for this topical module. So first, regarding discrimination experiences in the context of students' studies, we asked the students about 11 different criteria. So for example, gender or age. And for each of these criteria, the students indicated whether they felt discriminated by 3 different groups of people. So either by fellow students and or by teaching staff and or by university staff. And we also asked students about specific discriminating situations. I'll call this hostile ad hominem behavior throughout the presentation. And these were 11 specific situations, like, for example, being treated as if others are afraid of you, or hearing, seeing, reading others joking about or laughing at you. And for these 11 situations, students indicated whether they have experienced them many times in the past year, once or twice in the past year, or some when but not in the past year. And for all the analyses I'm presenting today, we combined the 3 yes categories. And to measure the safety feeling of students, they indicated both in their neighborhood as well as on the premises of their higher education institution whether they feel safe walking alone in the dark there, on a 5-point scale from very safe to very unsafe. And to start with, I'll present some data based on all EUROSTUDENT countries taken together. So for a general overview, you can see here the prevalence of discrimination experiences. And we can see that taking all these countries together, gender is named most often, reported by about 8% of students, on age by about 6% of students. So 8% say that they've been discriminated in the context of their studies due to gender, whereas discrimination due to disability, skin color, or parents' education are reported the least by only about 2% of all students. Regarding the source of discrimination, so who students felt discriminated by, on cross-country average, we can see that students primarily report being discriminated by fellow students, followed by their teachers, and then followed by other university staff. And this ranking holds true for every single EUROSTUDENT country, even though, of course, the percentage rates might differ within the countries. And regarding study fields, I also present the data for all EUROSTUDENT countries taken together. We can see here that the percentage rates of discrimination experiences vary quite a lot, from 17% of students who report any kind of discrimination experiences in the study fields of business and administration, up to more than 30% of students in medicine and dental studies. And as this is taken together, we have to keep in mind that it can differ very much within each country, and this is why I also want to present something regarding the countries separately here. When we regard them separately, there is no clear picture evolving, but some patterns do emerge. So, for example, in 5 countries each, the shares are highest in architecture or medicine and dental studies. And on the other hand, in 4 countries each, the shares are lowest in education, science, or teacher training. So this is at least a little pattern that emerges. And what we also see is that the differences in the shares per field of study vary. So in Romania, for example, it's the variation is quite small. So it's only 1.7 times more in arts than in the social sciences, whereas in Georgia, for example, it's discrimination in health is 4.4 times higher than in agriculture. And throughout the remaining presentation, I'll mostly report the data separately for each country, so you can look out for your country if you're most interested in that. And I'll focus on all students depicted with blue bars, and also 2 focus groups that are important both in the context of higher education as well as regarding discrimination experiences. And this is, on the one hand, gender, so I'll depict the female students with light blue indications, and the other focus group is disability. So we'll present the data on students with disabilities that said that these disabilities are limiting them in their studies. Here we see the percentage rates of all students who indicated to have experienced discrimination within the context of their studies, irrespective of the criterion they felt discriminated for, and also irrespective of the person they felt discriminated by. We can see that for most countries, the percentage rates lay between 20 and 25%. However, there are also few countries with lower rates. So for example, in Norway, it's only about 12% of students who report any discrimination experiences within the context of their studies. And in this graph now, we added the focus group of female students in light blue. And something that catches our eye immediately is the fact that there is no country in which the percentage rates of female students experience discrimination is lower or equal to the percentage rates of male students with discrimination experiences. And we also see that there are some countries where the differences are higher. So for example, in Austria or in Malta, and also some countries where the differences are lower or negligible, for example, in Hungary or in France. And looking at our second focus group, the students with disabilities, limiting them in their studies, depicted in the orange lines, we see that the differences are even more pronounced. In some countries, there's nearly every second student with disabilities reporting discrimination experiences. And again, of course, as always, there are quite some differences between the countries. Even though teachers are only named second most often as source of discrimination experience, as I just showed you before, such discrimination experiences by teaching staff might be especially threatening for affected students due to the unequal power relationship within higher education. So what we see here is that on average, about every 10 students reports discrimination experiences by their teachers, and the percentage rates vary between 4 and 17%. And when we have a separate look at female and male students, we again see that more female students report having been discriminated by their teaching staff than male students do. And again, this is also the case for students with disabilities, and the differences are a lot higher again, with in some countries nearly every third student with disabilities saying that they've been discriminated by their teaching staff. And for each group of focus, we also wanted to present one specific criterion combined with one specific group of perceived discriminators. So for female students, this is discrimination due to gender by teaching staff. And we can see here that the percentage rates are rather small compared to what I have just presented before. But again, we see that female students report more often to have experienced discrimination by their teaching staff due to gender than male students do. And also for the students with disabilities, we wanted to know how often they report to have been discriminated due to their disability by teaching staff. And here we see that it's on average 4 in 100 students who say so, but also again that there are some countries, for example, Georgia or Portugal, where it's nearly every 10 students saying that they have experienced discrimination due to their disability by teaching staff. That was the first part on the discrimination due to different criteria, and I'll now turn to the specific hostile ad hominem behavior situations we asked the students about. And here again, I'll first present the data combined for all countries to gain a first impression on the different situations we asked about. We see here that the percentage rates differ quite a lot. For example, hearing others joking about or laughing at you by 26% of students is reported most often, whereas being subjected to physical violence is only reported by about 6% of all students. And just as a reminder, please keep in mind that we combined all the 3 yes categories for this and the upcoming analyses. This is also why probably the percentage rates here are very high. So we can see that, for example, in Finland, the Czech Republic, and Romania, more than 55% of students, so more than every second student, report having experienced such discriminating situations within the context of their studies. And also in the countries with the lowest percentage rates, which is Norway, Iceland, or Croatia, it's still 40% or less. Regarding the focus group of gender, we now see a different pattern compared to the general discrimination experiences. The differences between female and male students are quite small, and also now there are some countries in which male students report slightly more discriminating situations than the female students. But when we look at the focus group of students with disabilities, the pattern looks familiar. Also for the hostile ad hominem behavior, we see that students with disabilities report having experienced them more often, and it's nearly like 2/3 of students in some countries who have experienced such situations. And I'll now have a closer look at two specific discriminating situations that are specifically interesting for each of the focus group. Regarding gender, we were interested in the specific situation of sexual harassment. And as we can see here, female students report more often to experience sexual harassment than male students do. And the prevalences are very low in Azerbaijan, where only 3% of female students report having experienced sexual harassment, whereas on the other end, in Finland, they are quite high, with 37% of female students indicating so. Also, for the second situation of interest that is being treated as less smart or capable than others, the percentage rates of female students are higher than the rates of male students, with again Azerbaijan being an exception in a magnitude. And regarding the focus group of students with disabilities, we chose to have a closer look at the specific situation of being asked inappropriate or offensive or overly personal questions. And we can see that the percentage rates of students with disabilities are definitely higher compared to students without disabilities. And this is also the case for the second specific situation, namely being called names or seeing someone using one's identity as an insult, even though here the differences are less pronounced. And I'll now turn to the third part of the topical module, which is student safety feeling while walking alone in the dark. And here I only depict the data for the specific focus groups, so only for female students first and then for the students with disabilities, because we saw in the data that these two groups are more affected. For female students, we can see that in nearly all countries, more female students feel unsafe in the neighborhood than on the premises of their higher education institution. On average, nearly every fourth female student in all EUROSTUDENT countries feels unsafe or very unsafe walking alone in the dark in their neighborhood. And on the premises of the higher education institution, it's 14% of female students. And what we can see here, for example, is that in Finland, female students feel very safe, both on their institutions and also in their neighborhood, whereas in Ireland, on the other end, it's quite some female students who don't feel safe. And we can find the same pattern also for students with disabilities. So again, they feel more safe in or less unsafe on the premises of the higher education institutions than in their neighborhood. And the variation between the countries is still quite high. And I'd also like to show you something that you cannot find in the report. So this is students' serious thoughts of completely abandoning higher education studies. And here we split students in two groups. So students who have experienced discrimination and students who haven't. And what we can see here is that students who have experienced discrimination have higher shares of seriously thinking of completely abandoning higher education studies than the students who have not felt discriminated. And there are quite some differences between the countries again. In some countries, the shares are twice as high or higher, and in others, there are nearly no differences. So, for example, in Georgia, Romania, or Azerbaijan. And I'd like to summarize the findings now. So, discrimination experiences in the context of higher education do unfortunately occur, which renders discrimination a topic that should be paid more attention to. And many students do fortunately feel safe at the premises of the higher education institutions. However, there's still room for improvement, especially for specific groups and specific countries. And we looked separately at two groups, so female students and students with disabilities. And throughout all topics, we looked at those groups reported a lot more discrimination experiences compared to their counterparts. And as an outlook, I'd like to highlight a few things. So when I presented data regarding various study fields in the beginning of my presentation, for example, we could see that the information is hidden in the aggregated data that this presentation and also the report is based on. So therefore, everyone who is part of a national team should dive deeper into these discrimination experiences, for example, within various study cultures, regions, or institutions. And I'm glad we might learn more about this during the presentations from our Swedish colleagues in a few moments. And Unfortunately, with the data, we don't know whether this discrimination experiences students indicated in the survey were also reported to anti-discrimination services by them. And we additionally don't know whether students would even know where to report their discrimination experiences. So this is something it's worth to find out more about. And therefore, policymakers and institutions should focus on providing students with enough information and enlarging the opportunities of low-level contact points for reporting discrimination experiences. And also, for example, providing customized training courses for the teaching staff could be one measure to reduce discrimination. And yeah, I'd like now to open the room for some short questions, and I'm looking forward to discussing the findings with you at the end of our today's EUROSTUDENT Talk session. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cordelia. Very quick and very fruitful overview of all the EUROSTUDENT 8 countries regarding discrimination topic. Any questions from our listeners? Please post it to the chat or just raise hand and let us know that you would like to ask or comment. We can take 1 or 2 questions at a moment, and also we can discuss it in the end. But if there is anything you would like to ask from Cordelia, then you can do it now as well. Meanwhile, I can ask something myself. As we know, it's the first time that EUROSTUDENT collected data on the topic of discrimination. And probably you as a researcher also had some assumptions, hypotheses, how the situation could look like. When you finally received the results and you saw the international so-called picture of the situation, were the results better or worse than you expected? I know it's a tricky question, but
Yeah, it's a very good question, I think. Thank you. So I can't really answer it, I guess, because I think if it depends on what you look at. If you look on some of the countries where the percentage rates are quite low, it's kind of encouraging. But also on the other hand, there are countries with very high percentage rates. But on the other hand, which is also important to know, is that high percentage rates don't necessarily mean that it's that in these countries there are a lot more discrimination experiences than in the other countries. So it could also be that there is a climate of being very alert about possible discrimination experiences, or that students have just recently learned about discrimination and therefore they are more alert and report it more often in a questionnaire. So this is what is very important for me to keep in mind when we look at these data, that there might be different reasons for either very low or very high or average discrimination experiences. So that's why I wanted to point out that it's important to dive deeper into that, and also have more reports about it also at each institution.
yeah, and actually this international comparative view really gives us the very first picture how and where exactly we should look when we are thinking about our own country. Any other questions to Cordelia? Or maybe people are eager to hear about Sweden. So maybe we can move on, and please, our Swedish colleagues, the floor is yours. We can't hear, but we can.
All right. Thank you, Sofia. It's you have to make it.
It's okay.
You have to, yeah, exactly. Now it's perfect.
Good.
Yeah, and we can take the next picture, although this is a nice photo to look at also. Yeah, welcome to EUROSTUDENT 8 in Sweden. We are going to present a little bit different parts, but I thought first I will say some general things. 40,000 students were contacted in Sweden. 7,300 answered, that's 18% of response rate. Last time we had 20, so it's a little bit lower than before. We used a lot of register data. We have a lot of register data in Sweden. So we used it so students didn't have to answer all the questions because some of them we knew already answers. And we used the register rate also weighing. We were weighing on 7 different things. You can see the list here. And we are writing 3 short reports. Before we wrote long reports, now they are short reports, they're easier to disseminate. One on discrimination experiences at Swedish universities. The other one on midlife students. Recently, they have been introduced a new student grant system for transition and retraining for midlife students. This is the reason why we are looking at this. The grant system wasn't there yet when we did the EUROSTUDENT study, so this is something new. And the last one is students with mental health problems in Sweden. We can go to the next picture. Thank you.
Okay, so as Jari said, we will talk about the 3 short reports we've written based on the data from EUROSTUDENT 8. And we'll also tell you a little bit about another report about Swedish national minorities, which is not EUROSTUDENT, but very close related to the issue of discrimination. First, I would like to tell you about the discrimination report and how we choose to handle the data. And if you're going to Vienna in July, you will hear Jari talk more about this, because today you will get just a brief introduction about this discrimination report. So since our idea was to make short reports, we choose to only include the Swedish legal grounds of discrimination in this report. And of those, 6 out of 7 were included in the EUROSTUDENT survey. Gender, ethnicity, religion, disability, sexual orientation, and age. The 7th discrimination ground was not included, which is transgender identity or expression. And so other grounds of discrimination in the survey is not included in this report, which makes the numbers a bit lower, because in total 19% of the students had experienced discrimination based on those 6 grounds of discrimination that we included. When we included all grounds included in the survey, it was 23%. And we could see quite a large difference between men and women, 22% compared to for women and 14% for men. So when we divide it into the different grounds of discrimination, it looks like this. That the most common ground of discrimination was gender. 12% of all the respondents had experienced that. Then comes age with 8% and ethnicity with 7%. And there we include skin color, ethnic background, and nationality, because that is how the Swedish ground of discrimination is expressed. And religion 3%, disability 3%, and 2% for sexual orientation. And when we divided those results into women and men, we saw significant differences, where women had experienced more discrimination for all categories except ethnicity and religion. Especially the gender discrimination was very high for women. And in addition, the Swedish version of the survey gave students the possibility to leave comments, which gave us a deeper information about different experiences. And around 250 students wrote comments on the section of discrimination. And some of them described difficulties with belonging to the minority gender in their study program, both when it came to different treatment and expectations, and when it came to sexual harassment, which is, of course, a large problem for women. And for men, ethnicity was the most common ground of discrimination, which lead us to the next theme, that we looked into students with foreign background compared to Swedish background. And with that, we mean we had adapted it to the Swedish data, the Swedish statistic, meaning foreign background is born abroad or born in Sweden with two parents born abroad. And the overall results show that students with foreign background feel more discriminated than students with Swedish background. In that group, 26% felt discriminated compared to 17% for the group with Swedish background. And in this group with foreign background, ethnicity was the most common ground of discrimination. And it was also more common to have experienced 2 or more grounds of discrimination. And this, of course, impacts those students and causes stress as in their daily lives as students. Now we go to a quote from the open comments. I'm often discriminated during internship. Supervisors, colleagues, and patients have asked me things like, when are you going back to your country? I love my life in Sweden and plan to live here. Such questions hurt and make me feel less welcome. Patients sometimes are unfriendly when they don't get a Swedish person helping them. And this shows a common issue in the open comments because it was experiences of discrimination on work placements or internships. It was really frequent in the comments. And this wasn't something that we asked for, but it was a very common issue anyway. So it shows that it's an important theme to the students. And most commonly, this discrimination experiences in work placements was about ethnicity, and like this quote, but also gender was frequent. And when students spend time in workplaces, they are more exposed and have to manage more on their own. And they also depend on the supervisor and the colleagues there, which makes it more of a challenge. And we could also see a correlation between experiences of discrimination and serious thoughts of abandoning higher education. And probably part of the explanation is experiences in work placements, and that students decide that they don't want to work within the field they are studying. So discrimination, harassment, and racism is also something that students from the Sweden's 5 national minority groups experience. So I will now change focus from EUROSTUDENT and tell you about another study that is not within EUROSTUDENT, but maybe something that could be included in EUROSTUDENT in the future. So the national minority groups in Sweden are Jews, Roma, Sami, Sweden Finns, and Tornedalians. And those groups' rights are protected by law. And our role as a Council for Higher Education is to promote their rights and their languages in higher education. And last year, we published a report based on interviews with students from those 5 groups. And I will now briefly tell you about the results. And first, I want to make clear that, of course, there is diversity between the groups and also within the groups. But they have also some things in common. So the main results from this study are that university is more of a safe space for students from the national minorities than school has been earlier in the education system. And many of the students from national minorities are the first in their family to go to university, which is a challenge in different ways. For example, when it comes to support from home and academic writing. And this is true for all the minorities except the Jewish group, who have a long and strong tradition of higher education. And even though it's better at university than in school, harassment from other students are quite common for some of the groups. The students are especially exposed in group works and work placements. Particularly, the Roma minority were concerned about discrimination in the labor market after completing their studies, possibly affecting their willingness to apply for higher education. And lack of knowledge about the national minorities is a problem, according to the interview students. They encounter prejudices and they are not visible as a group, and they often need to stand up for their minority. And this leads to exposure and minority stress. Another important thing is the minority languages. Because of former assimilation policies in Sweden, where the groups couldn't study in their languages, there is now a revitalization process going on to make studies in the different languages more available and developed. And the last thing is that the students from the national minority wish to be more visible within universities. And this could be done through symbols, signs in the minority languages, flags at their holidays, or, for example, books, more books in the university libraries. And they also suggest that it should be possible to get a degree certificate in a minority language, and that the teachers add minority perspectives in their teaching. So this was a brief introduction to two of the studies. And now I will leave over to Jari. So we'll talk about the so-called midlife students.
All right, welcome to midlife students. We will go to the next picture right away. So what is midlife students? In Sweden, we talk about the midlife students. Sofia, can you change the next picture?
I'm trying, but right now it just got stuck somehow. I will see.
All right. That poses a problem. Anyway, we have received, I already mentioned earlier that we have this new scholarship system for midlife students, so that makes it more interesting for us to have a special look at this group. Now let's see if we can get some midlife students out of the computer.
It's really strange. When I finished speaking, then it's...
There are always some technical problems, but we will be right on the way.
Maybe if you started from the one that the slide that Jari needs.
No.
Yeah. Now you can see who are the midlife students. In Sweden, we have made studies earlier, so somebody has decided that it is the age group 35 to 54, and nearly every fifth student in Sweden is a midlife students. 70% of them are women, so it's largely female population, and midlife students earn significantly more money than younger students, but they still have more financial problems. And when we look at the question of if they can pay unexpected required expense of 700 euros, it's a much bigger problem for midlife students than for younger students. So it is tougher economically. And then also more than 1/3 of midlife students study part-time, majority do distance learning, and half of the students consider themselves primarily as workers, so they differ quite a lot from young students. And then we look into the mental health problems, then only 18% report mental health problems compared to 29% among the younger students. So there also there is a difference. We can go to the next picture if we manage. Yes. And then we look at the income, the money coming in, and the first we have the younger group, and then it goes to the older one. And if you look at the younger groups, then the first one is study loan. It's 46% of their income. as state study loan. And then comes the pink one, 24%, which is state study grants, and together they cover the majority of the income of the younger students. And then you notice that when we go further to the older age groups, that part becomes smaller and smaller, and the red part instead, income from work, grows quite a lot. So it changes, the income changes, distribution changes quite a lot. And the other income parts, they don't change so much. We can go to the next picture. And then we look also feeling of belonging. We asked about if they have thought about abandoning higher education study and if they feel that they really belong to higher education studies. And here we can see, if you look at the green parts, that 75% of the midlife students, they absolutely have never thought about abandoning studies. They are very sure that they will continue with it, which is compared to 69 among the other students. So the midlife students are more determined. And if we look at the belonging to higher education, 52% of the midlife students absolutely believe that they belong in higher education, compared to 43% of younger students. So these are also something of our findings. Then we go to the next picture and over to Erika.
Okay. We also presented a small report on students with mental health problems in Sweden. And you can go to the next picture. We described the situation that of students that had indicated mental health problem and the support they request also. According to Swedish law, every sector of society must work to ensure that all individuals can participate in society and that existing obstacles to participation are removed. And that's why we're interested in this support question. The report on the students with mental health problems show that every third student, 29%, experienced mental health problems. In Swedish society at large, it's 15%. Female students were more likely than males to indicate experiencing mental health problems. The women were also younger than the men and more often had a psychiatric diagnosis. A higher proportion among students with a Swedish background reported mental health problems compared to students with a foreign background. Next picture, please. Here, this table shows the distribution of self-reported mental health problems, where you can see that anxiety disorder and depression were the types of self-reported mental health problems that the vast majority reported. It should be noted that the Swedish report does not include neuropsychiatric diagnosis in the analysis, as ADHD is the only neuropsychiatric diagnosis included in the questionnaire. You can go to the next picture. The report also deals with limitation due to impairment, and there were 60% of the students who experienced mental health problems that indicated limitations in their studies, where 33% among these were severely limited in their studies. And the Swedish questionnaire, as Sophia told us, includes the comments are, there are also comments on the support. In Sweden, we have a Swedish national question concerning the support that the HIEs give the students that are limited in the studies, and not only the question regarding support from HIEs and society at large. This national question was also included in earlier EUROSTUDENT surveys. And in EUROSTUDENT 7, a large share of the students who reported mental health problems reported that they lacked sufficient support from the HIEs. That result is consistent with other student studies and appears also in this study. At the same time, there were many students who indicated that they received adequate and good support. And the comments regarding the support to overcome the limitations in their studies, you can see here, show that the support for the students, often there were different groups. Some come from teachers as driving spirits, I don't know if you say that, but it kind of they really work for you, the teachers that really work for you. Some students who would like to support found the path to support too difficult. There's an uncertainty about what support that is available. A medical certificate is often required, did some say, and there's also ambiguities between the role of the student health and the role of primary care. And in connection with this, I take the opportunity to inform you that the Swedish government has invested 25 million Swedish crowns in a web portal for student health. And this portal was launched in January this year. So that's why I put it in this PowerPoint, where you can go and check it out. So that's something that is not, I mean, maybe next EUROSTUDent there will be better outcome here. Next picture, please. The report addresses also dropping out of studies. The top table shows students without mental health problems, and the bottom one, those with. The shades of purple show thoughts of abandoning HE studies. The table shows that thoughts about dropping out are quite a lot more common among students with mental health problems, and that more men than women with mental health problems are thinking about dropping out. As there is a higher share of women, as I told you earlier, that indicate that they have a diagnosis, maybe this affects these results is something that we're thinking of. If the women receive treatment, maybe this affects how you manage and cope with life and studies. Thank you.
Next picture.
Thank you all. Very interesting insight to Swedish context. Any questions from our listeners about Sweden, or maybe you now have also questions to Cordelia? It's an open ground for all the comments and questions now. Anybody? Yes, Joris is asking that he doesn't have a microphone here, but he has a question about Swedish midlife students. You mentioned that 1/3 of these students study in part-time. Does that mean 2/3 of these students are full-time students? And if so, how do you manage to study full-time?
Yeah, we didn't ask that, but that's correct. 2/3 are full-time students, and it is common to work during weekends or evenings or something like that. Not very common in Sweden, not as common as maybe in some other countries, also Nordic countries, because in Sweden everybody gets student grants and student loans, but that is linked to if you have other income. So if you work a lot, you don't get those benefits. So it is more common in Sweden not to work. But some people work during weekends mainly and holiday periods.
Okay, thanks. I actually also had a question about midlife students. That is it so that this is the first time that they are in higher education, or is it actually so that they are maybe acquiring a second degree, maybe like a career turn or something? Do we know about that?
Both are in this group, you could say. So there are those who are changing their careers and those who are who want a better position in their work. As I mentioned earlier, so we have now this new grant system, which started in 2022. So it was a little bit too late to affect the survey, but we can see that we have those two groups applying for this new grants, both those who want to get a higher level within their profession and those who want to change completely.
Mm-hmm. It will be interesting to look into that then when the grant or the financing scheme has been in place for a longer time. Anyway, any other questions or comments? Yes, there is one question. Could you explain more about the Swedish student portal where they can report mental health problems? Jessica.
Nu får du sätta på din. Ja, it is not for reporting. It's more for helping students to cope with their mental health problems. Maybe help for not procrastinating, getting in touch with students' health, or the student health, and the people that coordinate the aid for students with impairments. So it's more like a portal where you can go and find out more. Where can I get help, and what, and things like that.
Okay,
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Jessica says that. Thank you very much. I was actually also wondering that you mentioned that the web page was ready in the beginning of this year, right?
Yes.
It's been like
it's very new.
Half year, but has there been any feedback from students already? That how do they find this web page? Are they satisfied? Do they find it necessary?
I don't know. The interesting thing is that it's actually our council that has been involved in creating this web portal, but I haven't seen anything that they've done any evaluation right now. But I think they will do, because it's something that they are very keen on doing. I think they want to know that they have that this initiative is working, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? I have a question about discrimination topic in Sweden as well. That what about the readiness of higher education institutions to deal with that topic? Cordelia mentioned before that we don't know how much support is available, if at all, and maybe there are no special services or places to turn to when there are problems, when you feel that you're discriminated. How do the higher education institutions see that situation in Sweden? Are they dealing with that topic?
Yes, I would say so, because they have to, according to the Swedish discrimination law, they have, in English, I'm not sure, but they have to have active measures to, what is the name? What is förebygga called, Erika? They have to make discrimination not happen.
Prevent.
To prevent it, with a systematic plan and work. And part of that is to investigate how frequent it is. But of course, there are different parts of discrimination. They have maybe more experience with dealing with gender discrimination than, for example, ethnicity. So it has to need to be developed as well.
Improvement can be done. But what about maybe exchanging some best practices, either between higher education institutions or maybe between countries as well? Because when I was looking at the presentation about national minorities, then I was thinking that some of the minorities, like Sami people that you mentioned, they are the same, like the same minorities in Finland, for example. Do you know how these minorities are doing there? Have you maybe exchanged some practices, compared the situation?
Now I need to see if my colleague Jenny is online, because she's the expert in this.
Hello. Yes. Not formally, I wouldn't say. We have some experiences where we compare the situation in Norway when it comes to Tornedalians, kvener in Norway, but no formal comparisons as of now.
Yeah, I can imagine it would make a nice EUROSTUDENT comparison as well, to take all these Nordic countries, for example, together and then look to that data.
For sure.
Anyway, any other questions, comments, ideas? Yes, another question from Joris. You mentioned the reasons of discrimination, with gender being the most prevalent reason. This is also because of the size. The potential group is bigger compared to the students who have a disability, for example. But have you looked at in which group you have the highest chance of being discriminated?
And
I'm not sure if I understand the question perfectly. Like, what group would be female or students with migration background, or yeah? So I'm not quite sure, but of course, what Joris mentions here is that like every person can be discriminated due to gender, and maybe not every person can be discriminated due to their ethnicity, for example. But what we also saw, for example, in the French survey, they adapted it a bit, and they also encouraged students to also mention positive discrimination, because for many people, when you hear discrimination, firstly it comes to mind that it's negative experiences. But of course, being, for example, coming from a wealthy background or whatever, could lead to positive discriminations within some situations, or if your parents have a tertiary education. So in this case, everyone could indicate discrimination experiences, also regarding discrimination due to disability, so due to not having a disability, which, yeah, technically renders the groups the same. But of course, I would say that most people only think, or mostly think, about their negative discrimination experiences when asked about them.
Thank you for commenting, Cordelia.
it's a really interesting question, because it also goes into intersectionality. For example, if you are a Black woman, or maybe also with a disability or so, there are a lot of interesting things we can see in this data, I think.
Yes, exactly. So I also had a quick look at that. I don't have the exact data here, but of course there are some students with like 2 or 3 different discrimination sources or discrimination types, so to say. So mostly it's then yeah, maybe it's a gender and ethnicity, as you just said, Sophia, or also disability and gender, which are among the highest.
So many different aspects to still look into. Like many EUROSTUDENT talks will follow. Any final questions or comments before we wrap it up? Yeah, Joris said that as a follow-up, should we change the EUROSTUDENT question and tend to include positive discrimination? Perhaps we can think about it in EUROSTUDENT 9. But I think we can wrap it up, because the time has really passed very quickly. It has been very fruitful discussion and very interesting and very fruitful presentations as well. Thank you, Cordelia, Sophia, Jari, and Erika. It was really nice to have you here. It was the last EUROSTUDENT Talks of this so-called season. We will have a summer break in July and August, but we will be back in September. And actually, we will continue where we stopped, because the final part of today was about mental health. And in September, we were going to present the results of mental health and well-being topical module. So we will continue from there. Meanwhile, you can all re-watch previous EUROSTUDENT Talks if you have missed some of them before. You can find them via EUROSTUDENT webpage or in YouTube when you're searching for EUROSTUDENT Talks. And as mentioned already earlier, our Swedish colleagues, and actually Cordelia as well, will be present in EUROSTUDENT 8 final conference in Vienna. It takes place already in a month, 10th and 11th of July in Vienna. And the registration is still open. So I also added this link to the chat. So I hope to see many of you in Vienna in summer, and also many of you back here in September. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.